Good morning, and thank you for joining us at this year's mega conference with Osep grantees from across the country. It has been an exciting 3 days, and I hope you agree with me. Incredible sessions, applicable and timely content. I also hope that you have found the opportunity to establish new professional connections and discuss shared issues. I think that it's important that we all remember we're in this together, the good and the challenging times. From day one, we heard strong messages from presenters, and I hope you will consider implementing their messages when you return to your roles in your local settings. Secretary Cardona got us off to a great start, sharing his commitment and experience and passion about building back better. Cornelius Minor, a teacher, shared key insights of centering our work within an equity frame, and the panel gave us further actions to take when we return home. Cindy and Katie's fireside chat once again was a demonstration of the expertise and commitment of our new political leadership. Gabriella's story of her journey and perseverance reminded us all of the types of outcomes and opportunities we're all working towards for children with disabilities and, of course, their families. Juliana's message of how we can better support teachers in their training and in their jobs was so inspirational. Philip and George's great discussion yesterday about the considerations on how we might navigate the issues we are all talking about as we prepare for this fall and the new school year. And lastly, the remarks from Larry and Greg. Their leadership is so appreciated and critical that we have such a helpful role in navigating our new positions. As I said on Monday, I want to recognize the efforts of all of our attendees over these past 18 months, both the Osep staff and our grantee partners across the nation in support of infants, toddlers, children and youth with disabilities, and of course, their families. Again, I can't say this enough. You have demonstrated exceptional leadership and resilience, consistently working to improve the outcomes for children with disabilities and supporting their families. It's been a challenging year, but I've watched and I've listened as each of you in your unique roles have responded and addressed the ever-changing needs of one of our most vulnerable populations throughout this pandemic. Over the last year, we've met with multiple stakeholder groups, including the Infant and Toddlers National Coordinators Association, the Council for Exceptional Children, the National Association of State Directors of Special Education, the National Disability Rights Network, just to name a few. I have at least once a month a meeting with a national group. These conversations are incredibly useful and help me to stay abreast of the ever-changing educational landscape. These conversations have informed the development of the many technical assistance activities provided by OSEP-funded centers, topics for further clarification, or topics that we discuss at our monthly TA calls. I would like to spend a moment to talk about my personal philosophy regarding collaboration and that of OSEPs. As I mentioned a moment ago, we are all in this together, and I meant that. Throughout my career, if I could identify those instances when an activity or perhaps an initiative was successful, it was the result of collaboration and effective communication. Prior to, during, and after such events. Absent of this, challenges were common and relationships weren't established to aid in developing solutions. Yes, sure, there were often variables at play, limited time, limited funding, etc. However, the short-term and long-term benefits of working together are immeasurable. And it just makes sense, doesn't it? So I am so proud of the collaboration that takes place between the department, the offices within our department, and across the government with the Department of Health and Human Services, particularly since March 2020 last year when the pandemic began. Department collaboration has been extensive, to include collaboration with our offices of Institute of Education Sciences, Office of Elementary and Secondary Education, and last but not least, the Office of Education Technology. Our partnership with HHS is extensive and our collaborative work with infants, toddlers, and children and youth has been incredible. Some examples of department collaboration that I would like to highlight include working with OESE to support children, parents, and families during COVID, monthly check-ins, comprehensive center network monthly calls, development of volumes 1 and 2 of the department roadmap to reopening schools handbook, coordinated communication with OESE pertaining to the uses of the ESSER funds and the American Recovery Funds, to support special education activities, Part B, Part C, and of course 619. As I mentioned ago, I'm so proud of our collaborative efforts with HHS. OSEP staff serve as co-project officers on preschool development grants, birth through 5, that are administered by HHS. OSEP staff collaborate with staff in the Health and Resources and Services Administration, Early Hearing Detection and Intervention Program to support some seamless coordination between Part C and EDHI systems to ensure that families with infants who are deaf or hard of hearing receive the appropriate and timely intervention that they need. And OSEP staff collaborate with the Office of Head Start to support inclusive opportunities for young children with disabilities. Even with all the challenges we've faced over these last 18 months, I want to highlight some of the successes that the last year has brought to us. We call those the silver lining, right? Many educators, practitioners, and families have learned to shift from person to virtual service delivery models. Granted, this wasn't successful for everyone, but there are many families that were really benefiting from the virtual instruction. This includes Part C early intervention services. Parents being at home have improved participation in infant and toddler services and options for service delivery, including telehealth. In many instances, access has improved for families who may have declined participation in prior years. Technology has allowed us to innovate and differentiate learning for all students, including, of course, those with disabilities. Children have had opportunities to try new ways to engage in learning. And I can't go on without mentioning our incredible OSEP-funded technical assistance centers, particularly NCSI and ECTA. Both of these centers have served as hubs for resources and tools in response to the pandemic. All of our incredibly talented OSEP-funded technical assistance centers quickly pivoted to address the ever-changing needs of states, educational leaders, teachers, service providers, and of course, parents and students. Now, let's look ahead towards school year 21-22. We want you to know that we are here to support you toward our common goal, always improving the outcomes of children with disabilities. Some of the activities that we have planned include issuing guidance clarifying the department's expectations for states and programs in implementing IDA, topics that you won't be surprised that we will be issuing guidance on, FAPE, child fine, evaluation, ensuring that students have an IEP on the first day of school, relooking at the students' present level of performance, etc. And as we've said earlier this week, we're planning on issuing the first phase of our guidance the end of August. Additionally, we're continuing with our rollout of differentiated monitoring and support 2.0. We're working on technology enhancements for our SPP APR database. And of course, the provision of technical assistance in the areas of state personnel development, teacher training, technology, equity, accessibility, just to name a few. We are also partnering with NASD and NCSI to roll out a year-long NASD new director training beginning this September and going all the way through next October of 2022. We're also planning a webinar with our friends in ITCA focusing on Part C and 619 uses of funds. Continuing to provide guidance on the use of ESSER, American Recovery Plan, CARES Act funds, so that states move forward with their plans and priorities to ensure that services for children with disabilities and their families are at the forefront of their conversations. And finally, regarding the FY22 President's proposed budget, there are several goals I want to highlight for you. improving the transition of services between Part B and C, leveraging Part D resources and centers, focusing on equity services, which are underserved population in Part C. We're anticipating a huge increase in our teacher training and mentoring grants as well. So before I close out, this morning I just learned some exciting news that I want to share with you. Over the years, Osep funded audio described educational TV shows have themselves become attendees as plentiful as celebrities at the Daytime Emmy Awards. This year is no exception. Osep's television access grants provided the audio descriptions for 13 nominated shows and one Emmy Award-winning program. I think this is just so incredible. 2021 Children's Emmy Award winner PBS Kids Talk About is a series that explores racial identity, inequity, racism, justice, and good trouble. According to Bridge Project Director Wendy Sapp, it was one of the most relevant television programs of the year, and the audio description helped ensure its broadcast was possible. Bridge Multimedia also provided disability portrayal consultancy for Emmy-nominated Xavier Riddle and the Secret Museums, which is a PBS Kids show. The 48th Annual Daytime Emmy Awards took place this past weekend. Bridge thanks our production and distribution partners and everyone at Osep. You know, this is just another example of the benefit of Osep centers. I'm so excited that they've won an Emmy. So in closing, I want to thank you again for all that you do to improve the lives of infants, toddlers, children, and youth with disabilities, and of course, our important families. As I mentioned earlier, Osep is here to support you, to work with you through having individual conversations with state leads, on-site visits. Hopefully next year we can resume those, or monthly technical assistance calls to respond to your unique needs and provide exceptional technical assistance to you and your teams. Our plans this year are based on the specific areas for assistance. I want to continue to hear from you, how we are doing, where are areas that we can improve. So please don't hesitate to reach out. Remember, our ultimate goal is to consistently improve the outcomes for children with disabilities through data-driven decision-making, cohesive efforts, positive feedback loops, and open, transparent communication. We know that none of this would be possible without you and your daily dedication. So in closing, thank you once again. And I hope you look forward to our final day of this year's conference. So with that, I turn it over to my friend Becca for the final plenary panel. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Hi, everyone. I am Becca Wallawender, and I am OSER's Director of Policy and Planning. Although you probably know me better from my 15 years in the Office of Special Education Programs, and of course in my award-winning turn as the music critic in Behind the Music, Discretionary versus Greg Core and the Jam Band. Today, though, I'm here to moderate the final panel of the 2021 OSEP Leadership and Project Directors Conference, the Policy Plenary. This is always one of the most well-attended and informative and exciting panels that we have every year, and I'm glad that we are getting to do it live, even in this virtual environment. I do have one announcement before I get to the panel, and that is that the slide deck will be available on the DEC website at the conclusion or following this plenary. So let me get to the panelists. You have all of their full bios in your conference materials, but I would like to just spend a couple minutes introducing each of them. Valerie Williams, a mom of a son who just happens to have Down syndrome, is the Government Relations Director for the National Association of State Directors of Special Education. Lindsay Jones, an avid sports fan, is the President and CEO of the National Center for Learning Disabilities. Sharon Walsh, a champion of infants and toddlers, is the Government Relations Consultant for the Council for Exceptional Children's Division of Early Childhood and for the IDEA Infants and Toddlers Coordinators Association. And finally, we have Jane West, a former college country and western opera singer, and a nationally recognized expert now who's led the policy work for the Higher Education Consortium of Special Education, the American Association of Colleges for Teacher Education, and the Teacher Education Division of the Council for Exceptional Children. We're going to dive right in, and I'm going to turn it over to Valerie.
Good morning. I'm very happy to be here. We're going to jump right in because I have a ton to go over in a very short period of time. So if we could go to the next slide, that would be great. So I'm going to spend a good amount of time, next slide please, going over funding, because without funding, nothing transpires. So some about education funding, some about special education, IDEA funding specifically. I'm going to go into a discussion about public perception, because our legislators do care what their constituents want. So we want to make sure that we're not just shouting out into the void, into a vacuum, and that we are aligned with what the public is wanting. So I have some polling on that I'm going to share with you, as well as some other major thoughts and priorities that NASD is turning over in their minds, trying to figure out how to grapple with, how to deal with, and yeah, a good amount on that. So to start, things have been a little hectic, I think, to say the least, and busy over the last 18 months or so. But we've also had the gift of time to think and be introspective, which is something we don't normally have. So we've had a chance to think about, why are we doing what we're doing? Should we be doing things differently? Is what we're doing working? And does it need to be improved or changed altogether? And in the midst of doing all that over the past 18 months, we're also looking ahead to the next school year, the 21-22 school year. And I just saw this morning some numbers that were released by Johns Hopkins that the rolling average for COVID cases is increasing in every state except 4. So we're going to need to continue to be flexible as we're looking forward, trying to figure out what next school year looks like. So just to share briefly, I come to this not only as a professional, but as Becca said, as a parent of a now 10-year-old with Down syndrome. So a lot of the issues that we've been discussing here at the conference and over the last 18 months, we've been dealing with personally at home. So we've had to navigate a lot of these issues. We have actually been trading off, acting as my son's dedicated aide, either being beside him or in the room for the entirety of the school year. And when hybrid was offered, we were one of those families that elected to keep him home. So we've had to navigate virtual IEP meetings, reevaluations, backlogs, and a lot of other things that have been pertinent to our discussions this week. And I have to tell you, it was not easy. It was difficult, but we got a bird's eye view into the classroom. We have a much better idea of our son's strengths, and we already had a great relationship with his school, which was actually forged before they knew what I did for a living, luckily. And we just all continue to extend grace to each other and support each other in the ultimate goal, which was making sure that our son received free and appropriate public education. So I'm just going to frame it with that. I'm going to jump right in, and I'm going to start with funding. Next slide, please. So just showing here, I honestly do think pictures are worth thousands of words. It brings things home. Here showing how, in terms of education funding broadly, we have very rarely had any meaningful and significant increases. The yellow bars are what you see, the regular funding that the department has gotten over time, and the green are emergency buckets of money that we've gotten. So the president's request that we're looking at right now is a significant increase over what we have gotten previously. So we're excited about that. Next slide, please. And more importantly, this would take us above 2011 level inflation adjusted terms. So if you kind of look back over time since 2011, we've been meandering a little bit up, a little bit down, but not really keeping up with inflation. So we as a system have been asked to do more with less continuously. And when you don't get meaningful increases over time, that's actually a cut. And that's been our argument. So in addition to not having full funding, which I'll go over into momentarily, we've been looking at small cuts over time and trying to make sure that all of our students receive what they have needed and being the best steward that we can be with the funds that we have had. Next slide, please. So the president's budget request FY 2022, this is a breakdown of what it looks like. So that green area is K through 12. That dark shaded area right next to it, 17%, is IDEA funding. 17% does not sound like a lot, but trust me when I tell you that it's more than we have been getting for the past number of years. It's a significant bump up. And I'll talk about how important that is in relation to what we have gotten up until now. Next slide, please. Okay, so the power of the purse. So what we're looking at right now, we're talking about funding. The House Labor HHS Education Appropriations Subcommittee is one of 12 subcommittees. They have proposed $102.8 billion for the department. That is almost a $30 billion increase over FY21. That is significant. Over $29 billion with a B dollar increase. Okay. Of that $102 billion, K through 12 is $65.5 billion, which is a 62% increase. This is significant. I don't know about you, but I and everyone else on this panel with me, we are very excited about this proposed budget. The previous budget for the department was $73 billion for K through 12. So specifically for IDEA, what we are looking at is a $17.2 billion with a B dollar increase for IDEA. So $3.1 billion increase is nothing to sneeze at. We can do a lot more for our students with this additional money and look at some of the systemic changes that need to be made. That will make a huge difference and go a long way. Next slide, please. So looking at the recovery funding, this is showing all three pots of money, the relief money that has come out, CARES, and then actually ESSER 1, 2, and 3 is what we refer to it. That last one should say 3. And it indicates how much money was given for K through 12 in each one. And in the last pot of money, we got $2.6 billion in IDEA specific funding. So just to back up for a moment, the K through 12 groups were advocating for roughly about $200 billion for K through 12 schools. What we anticipated was increased costs, obviously, for PPE and the multitude of other things that need to be done, given that the funds that we had originally were being stretched thin, looking at decreasing state revenues at the time, and knowing that the COVID impact on the schools was going to be very different than any other calamity we had ever dealt with. So in response to our request, Congress provided $197 billion total. What you see on this slide covers $190 billion, and that remaining money, which we also advocated for, was for the E-rate program to address the homework gap and access issues with technology. So you can see all of the different pockets of money, and we all know how it was distributed via the formulas. Next slide, please. Everyone is keenly aware, I'm sure by now, of all the allowable uses. We've had a ton of conversation. The department has been very helpful answering everyone's questions, providing webinars, and a lot of different venues for conversations to take place. And I think they've been very flexible in knowing that what one state and one district needs could be different from what another state needs. And so they've been very flexible with how the funds could be used based on what is needed in that area. Next slide, please. This goes to specifically to IDEA funding. So pretty much we have languished recently between the 14–15%. For anyone that does not know, when IDEA was initially put into law, Congress promised to pay 40% of the excess costs of educating students with disabilities. knowing that it would be a little more expensive. We have never gotten anywhere near that 40% promise being realized by Congress. You'll see that one year where we had that huge infusion of money, that those were actually our funds. That wasn't anything that was meant to be happening on an ongoing basis. So right now we're at around 15%. We've been around 14, 15, possibly 16 for a second, but what is being proposed in this president's budget would take us up to 17. And although it is not 40%, it is a meaningful increase in what we have gotten thus far over time. So we are excited about it and hopeful that we will reach that high water mark, if you will. Next slide. So this slide just goes to show what school districts use that original pot of money for, the ESSER $1. That first line, the darker line, indicates what was being spent during the school year in which COVID started. The lighter colored green line indicates the funding that was spent during this past school year. So you can see that PPE, tech and broadband, which is not at all surprising. We always knew about the homework gap and lack of access across the country. And COVID really shone a light on the desperate need for all students to really be able to access the curriculum during COVID. So, and additionally, we became keenly aware that providing FAPE in a virtual environment was challenging. You also see learning loss. We like to refer to it as lost opportunities for learning, not necessarily learning loss. And you can see that a significant amount of money was also used to maintain K through 12 activities, those bars over on the far right. Next slide, please. This shows what ESSER $2 were being spent on. And once again, you can see that the majority of it was being spent on learning loss. Next slide, please. So in terms of congressional legislation, there are two bills introduced specifically for students with disabilities and COVID. I'm not going to read what's on the slide. You can see this for yourself. The bill is identical, introduced in the House and the Senate. They are both in their various committees. We do not expect this bill to move, but as usual, we will keep an eye on it in case it does move and some advocacy is needed. We are grateful that they did not forget students with disabilities. We continue to work with the Hill to see what can be done to not just get more education funding broadly, but more IDEA specific funding. Next slide, please. So there are two major funding actions taking place on the Hill right now, which will impact education. One is the FY22 appropriations, and I already discussed the funding that's being proposed, and I already discussed the specific IDEA money, which will be an increase of $3.1 billion. The second is infrastructure. So there are two infrastructure bills at play at the moment. One of them is a bipartisan bill that does not include any additional infrastructure funding for schools. And when I say infrastructure, I think we're all aware we're talking about buildings. A lot of school buildings are very old. The HVAC systems are old. They're old in general, and they need some maintenance, some upkeep. In some places, we probably need new buildings altogether. The second bill that we're looking at would be the majority in the Senate using a budget process to fund some of the priorities from the American Jobs and the American Families Plan that did not get funding previously. And that would include infrastructure for schools, school buildings specifically. So we don't know how much money that would be, but there have been indications that there will be robust funding for those priorities. So we'll have to wait and see. But we have been arguing strenuously for infrastructure funding for schools. Next slide, please. I'm going to go over my next couple pretty briefly because there's something I really want to get to desperately. This shows that this slide, this poll was conducted a couple months ago. It shows that the majority of voters across race and across political party believe that too little money is spent on education. Next slide, please. And this slide goes to show that the top voter priorities are, in terms of education, number 3 is special education, which is important because we can show that we are in lockstep with the public, and what we want as advocates and as the system is exactly what the public wants. So I'm going to spend my remaining time on my other thoughts Next slide, please. We have got to be ready for the long haul. We're going to be dealing with the fallout from COVID for likely the next couple of years. And we have to remember, as has been said numerous times this week, that everyone did not have the same experience during the pandemic. There's been food insecurity, debilitating illness, a lot of death, housing insecurity, and a general sometimes inability to participate in school based on possibly attendance or broadband issues or a variety of things. We need to be ready to deal with the mental health needs, the trauma incurred not just by students, but as staff as well. We need to deal with the need for more instructional support personnel, which I will not go into because Dr. Jane West is going to give you more than you ever wanted to know on that topic. The need for more school social workers, counselors, school psychologists, nurses, things of that nature. We need to be prepared to address school climate in a more meaningful way, and that includes discipline, it includes restraint and seclusion, and it includes disproportionality. While we are dealing with that, we need to be careful not to over-identify for special education. We need to look at what has been exposed. The homework gap, which we always knew existed, it has become a big gaping hole. We have got to figure out what we will do the next time, because there will be a next time. We're not finished with this pandemic, and there will be other things that we need to deal with, whether it's hurricanes or wildfires or reasons why students cannot physically be in the building. We have got to do better by our teachers. We need to make sure that the teaching profession is a profession and a career of first choice, not something people try on or pass through, and we've got to make sure it's a career that pays enough to live on and to support a family on without having to get a second job. That's something we have got to devote some time and attention to. Professional development must be prioritized because I think we've always known there was a strong need for professional development, but it's not just in all the things that we perceived before. And now it's also in its assistive technology and a lot of other places that we didn't necessarily see a strong need for. And I'm going to divert to my paper right here because I've had a lot of things that have come to me over the last 24 hours. One thing that I have got to mention, and I am wrapping up, is the shocking lack of equity. We have got to focus more on what does not work well for our students, particularly those with the most significant disabilities. It's time, past time, to start looking at what is appropriate for our students and not just what is available. So I've got a few more things that I wanted to say, but I'm going to wrap up before this turns into the Gong Show and they pull me off the stage. So thank you very much. And I'm going to turn it over to my next partner in crime, Lindsay Jones.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Valerie. It's exciting to listen to you. And I think this has been a terrific opportunity for everybody to come together after such an unbelievable 18 months, as David mentioned as well. I'm so excited to be here presenting on this powerhouse panel of leaders in our field. These are all mentors to me and great colleagues, and I'm so honored to be with them here today. I am the president and CEO of the National Center for Learning Disabilities. And can we go to the next slide? Perfect. Our mission, if you don't know who NCLD is, our mission is to improve the lives of the 1 in 5 individuals with learning and attention issues. These are brain-based, indivisible learning disabilities, executive function disorders, and attention issues. And we do this through research, advocacy, and action. Let's go to the next slide. And as Val mentioned, I just had to take a moment to say, I can't even believe all of us are here at the end of this, through this. I just to give you a sense of our year, my son Maxwell, who's 14, he's going to be a freshman next year, which is unbelievable, in a public school in Alexandria. He has a 504 for reading and attention. So like Val, we were spot on this year. My husband and I were the homeschooling teachers. I'll say only one of us had to be disciplined for drinking on the job. That was a success. It's a good thing I'm a former attorney, so I was able to immediately step in and handle that with some administrative leave. We both came back at it. We started this year thinking, oh, it's a couple weeks, right? I literally posted a photo on my Facebook that said, making our own tortillas, day 4. What did I know? Why would I do that? I then literally, you can see my son Maxwell, how much he grew through that year, first of all, and didn't cut his hair. And I didn't care. It's fine. We're going with long hair. It's fine. We're all still here. He's still moving. So I want to say congrats to everybody and thank you so much to everybody for all you did for all of our kids this year and your own families. Applause for everybody. Okay, next slide. Valerie did a great job filling us in on the legislative and funding opportunities that are there, certainly pointing out they've been needed for so long, so much underfunding for years, and now historic need. But very pleased to see certainly the administration's budget request and the infusion of funding. I want to focus on 3 areas that we are concerned about for the field of special education and general education, and areas where we feel there are great opportunities right now for investment that can last a long time. First, evaluations. Next, whole child supports. And finally, accelerating learning. One last caveat about my presentation today. For this information, I'm reporting out NCLD-based research. This is research we've done partnering with universities or through focus groups and surveys of parents, professionals, and with other disability and civil rights organizations. And where we've been able to find research during the year, we've used it. But this is the typical learn while you earn type of moment. So I want to just make sure I caveat all of these 3 points with that. Next slide, please. Let's start with evaluations, special ed evaluations. When I worked as an attorney, we had backlogs then. This was many years ago. If we go to the next slide, we know backlogs are likely to be acute in many districts. The New York City public school system, of course, the largest in the country and an easy one to look at for this, in just projecting how many evaluations they would have assumed they would have done in a regular year, they cannot identify they would conduct about 16,000 special education evaluations, most of which didn't happen. So school districts are hitting this new year. Many have not conducted those evaluations, which are so intensive in terms of one-on-one or observation in the classroom, especially in the case of the largest number of evaluations conducted, those for individuals with learning disabilities, which often occur over time. So we know that districts are already focused on how can we address this backlog with capacity and other issues. The baseline is going to be really challenging. As Valerie mentioned, we already have issues with over-identification and under-identification in some cases. Identification isn't a perfect science. It's very challenging and it needs incredible educators and families to be able to conduct good, meaningful evaluations and eligibility. Districts need to be cautious, and we don't have a good sense of what has been caused by instruction loss or trauma or other mental health concerns or some of the dislocation, and what really is a disability. So we're pleased to see the department has lots of good guidance on this that we can use. Some of those same things are still there, but we'll need more. The main takeaway is communication with families is key, and investing some funds in this area for capacity, for good communication, absolutely critical. Next slide, please. To tackle this, at NCLD, we conducted several one-on-one interviews with psychologists and researchers, leading researchers in the field. We also conducted focus groups. Thank you to Case, the amazing Case, our case administrator focus groups, and also Digital Promises League of Innovative Schools and Innovative Educators. We also held 3 focus groups with parents. Next slide, please. It's clear that during the pandemic, there's a lot of dislocation and there's need in the area of evaluation. So today, actually, we're releasing 6 different publications. We created these in combination with Unidos US. They are an advocacy group on behalf of Latinx population. And they, of course, they're putting out several resources that look at just the identification of English learners during this as well. The key findings in these reports are really that most, but not all, students have been impacted negatively from the interruptions that happen in learning. Students with learning and attention issues, students with disabilities have been disproportionately affected. Many districts have struggled to keep up with evaluations for special education. They have been impossible in some cases to administer. NASP has done an incredible job throughout this year, putting out resources in real time to work with their psychologists and the teams in schools. They have some terrific information on this, but there is definitely going to be a backlog. I think administrators are really concerned about that, as are parents and families. And the top concern is making sure the need we're addressing is correct, that it's actually a disability. I think determining eligibility for special education will be more complex than ever. And so the number one thing that's identified by these, if you go to the next slide, you can see, of course, all the key top principles continue to apply. But it is clear from both focus groups with families and with administrators, when schools and families are open about the challenges, as Valerie said, when they are coming from a perspective of grace and understanding why, when families are given information about why it's so difficult to provide an evaluation, when we can be back in session, what parents can be looking for in the meantime or doing to provide as support at home, those situations go much better. Next slide, please. And at the highest level, we have to keep all of those in mind. But this complexity that we've discussed was also the number one thing identified by teachers that we surveyed in the spring of this year about what they were concerned about in the fall: whole child supports. Providing supports that can immediately address the many different social and emotional issues that could arise and are very likely to arise, as Valerie mentioned, and as many sessions this week have focused on. It's unprecedented for us to have a child population coming into our schools that has faced this level of food insecurity, housing insecurity, other types of issues, death and job loss and families. So really ensuring that our educators are ready coming into this year is going to be critical. We also know from some of our surveys that, and I'm talk about preaching to the choir, educators are exhausted after this year, schools and others. So there is a balancing act here as we plan for this year, have to address some of these things and use the opportunity that we have to invest these funds wisely in ways that can change the system. We have to balance that with ensuring that our educators are cared for and supported and not thrown in to situations where they don't have what they need to succeed. So let's go to the next slide. My second focus area, whole child of supports. These COVID challenges are incredible. These are just two that are listed here, but they are, as everyone knows, entirely unprecedented. We do have some research on how to handle these in spot sort of areas, but absolutely nothing like what we're seeing in response to this. And I'll say, I think the thing that surprised me the most this year was the unbelievable variation between schools within a district and districts. I used to think about states being quite different, districts being different, but the variation building to building of the school population, of the views of leadership is really quite unbelievable, and something we'll be focusing on and thinking about for the delivery of special education services for a long time to come. Let's go to the next slide. So, to look specifically at what teachers had identified that they wanted to be dealing with: whole child support, school climate, mental health, social emotional learning. We held, again, a separate 3 focus groups with parents. We gathered feedback in convenings from 22 partner organizations, all types of civil rights and disability organizations. And we worked with the chief state school officers to identify and analyze state policies on inclusive practices. Next slide, please. All of that research demonstrated a few key things. Top among them, inclusion is key. Inclusion, it is critical because we know that in addressing school climate, in ending exclusionary disciplinary policies, in providing mental health supports, in focusing on the whole child and social emotional learning, too often we see the siloed system of special education and general education. Too often, initiatives that will be put forward to help students in general education won't include students in special education in these areas because they'll say, well, we have a separate way of dealing with those students. They've got separate types of needs. The research and the reality doesn't bear that out. Where initiatives are working for the whole student population, schools need to think about all of their special education population benefiting also from those. That doesn't mean students with disabilities don't need individualized supports that are different and unique and tailored to them. But it does mean they are general education students first. And we've got to continue to push that mindset. We now have Katie Neese. That I think if anybody knows Katie, they think of that first, right? Students with special education students are general education students first. And that's what we see and what we saw with these whole child initiatives and our research, that there is a tendency to silo when applying these. And we've got to stand up and fight to be included in them in our schools for our kids. So we've developed a series of resources. They're on our website. There are some key questions you can see on this slide. In particular, we have recommendations for parents and teachers, how they can interact and educate and lead in their schools on these initiatives. But I want to go to the next slide because to conduct this research, we worked with the Yale Child Study Center, and one of the key things they did was they looked at, they analyzed 11,000 studies, over 11,000 studies just in social emotional learning. And what their takeaway was is that fewer than 1 in 10 of those studies reflected students with disabilities in their results. Nearly 3 in 4 of those studies didn't report on race. So most of our research on social emotional learning and the programs that you are using or purchasing in your schools hasn't been specifically tested on students with disabilities, hasn't really taken into account race. This is something as a field we have to address. Next slide, please. My third and final point, accelerating learning. Let's go to the next slide. NCLD, we'd been working on accelerating learning for several years before COVID. What I mean when I say that is that we've got kids way below grade level. We know they can get to grade level, and they got to, because we lose them and they begin to drop out, and they shouldn't. We were partnered with Boston University, and we conducted surveys this spring in 2021 of 1,251 general education teachers in March, and we did a second sample of about 1,100 in May. We held 3 focus groups. We were partnered with our partner understood.org, and they are educator fellows. What the results of that study showed us is that the majority of teachers, 87% of teachers, reported they loved teaching. They still love teaching even after this year. Maybe it's my own home experience teaching at home, which wasn't teaching at all. But I think that's just an incredible thing to build on, and makes me hugely optimistic for the future. But alarmingly, 58% are burned out, of course, and over 70%, as you can see, would like to continue to use strategies and other things to move on. That they used during COVID, when schools returned to full in-person instruction. So let's go to the next slide, please. What were the main things they really wanted? They want smaller cohorts of students to provide individualized attention. They continued to use education apps and games. We saw great use of people who were delivering over Zoom using captioning. There are lots of accommodations that should continue. They want to create smaller classrooms. Let's go to the next slide. I want to make sure everybody understands this critical piece of information that came out from NWEA as I wrap up here today. NWEA and their MAP test, they examined results from 2017 to 2019, so pre-COVID. And the key takeaway here is that students with disabilities during some years are learning at even greater pace during the school year than their gen ed peers, but they are experiencing much greater loss every summer. Next slide, please. We've got to ensure that as we go back with any bit of energy we have, we look at things that are emerging as accelerating learning to address instruction loss, power standards, competency-based education, tailored education, and high-impact tutoring. There are ways to invest in these types of practices. One of them, but thinking with a mindset that there are positive things that we have to build upon. There are things to bring out of this crisis that can help us. Virtual parent-teacher conferences would be one. Virtual IEP meetings would be another. We see broad support and incredible support for our students and teachers for their emotional needs and their capacity and increasing that. We've got some funds to do it. We're excited to see what you invest in and where it goes. Next slide, final slide. I want to say NCLD is giving 2 awards, one to an educator and one to an administrator. It's a $5,000 award for someone who during the pandemic went above and beyond and helped their students in the classroom. I want to encourage you to apply. Nominate someone, nominate yourself. We'd love to find and celebrate incredible educators. My final slide before I pass it. If you want to connect with us, if you want to connect with me, there's the information. Thank you again for all you do. And I want to pass this to one of my heroes and favorite people, Sharon Walsh.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. And hello, everybody. I'm sure you can already see what a pleasure it is for me and how fortunate I am that I get to work with my fellow panelists. I'd like to start us off today in the short time we have to kind of thread the early childhood focus throughout the topics that we've already been talking about. And I think if we go to the next slide, despite the year and a half that we've all been through, touching everybody, heartbreak and challenge as Lindsay and of course Valerie and David talked about already, the challenges have been great and of course they continue. But I think what we really want to focus on this morning, if we can, is in the midst of that, we have lots of opportunity. And I think a good way to start that opportunity discussion for us who really think through the lens of children, young children and their families would be to quote our Secretary of Education, who just recently, when speaking before the House Education and Labor Committee, in the course of his speech, 3 times at least, if not more, threaded and mentioned the notion of education priority starting at birth. When he was talking about the American Rescue Funds, he talked about providing a strong foundation from birth in education. When he was talking about the president's budget request, he talked about the importance of increased federal investment, and you heard Valerie talking about that before, from birth through college. So we have that statement right from the federal pulpit, if you will, about the importance of that education through the entire age range, beginning at birth, all the way through post-school. And so that's, for me, a good way to start this conversation. So let's keep moving. And I want to talk a little bit about funding, as we have done already a little bit on this panel. Talk about the funding, both from the rescue money, and then where we are with this year's actual funding levels that are moving along at quite a pretty exciting pace for us in early childhood, and then spend a little time talking about some other initiatives and things that we want to watch for and things you're all advocating for. So in the rescue funds, as we talked about before, these are one-time only funds. And I think by now you all know about them. Some of you are charged with figuring out the best ways to use those funds. Many of you, or hopefully all of you, are stakeholders in helping to inform and make those decisions, because it's critically important to us to make sure as a field that we can demonstrate, keep data, and report on the important things that we did with these rescue funds. We have to be able to demonstrate later that this was a very wise investment. And as Valerie told us, there were education funds in several of the COVID bills before the rescue fund, but not until the rescue plan money did we actually get some targeted IDEA money. And the focus in this slide, you can see, is an extra one-time only. Remember, sustainability's got to be what you're thinking. One-time only $200 million in preschool special ed, and one-time only $250 million in Part C early intervention. And for those of us in the advocacy community and the information sharing world that you live in, this was really an important recognition that, when COVID hit, and it hit all of us so quickly a year and a half ago, the early intervention birth to 3 programs across the country did not skip a beat. They immediately pivoted to virtual and home and tele. And so what we have was expenses that were never, ever envisioned before that and needed. So these funds are going to be put to good use, as well as using these funds for evidence-based practice for birth to 5 practitioners to work with families, to help families engage more, or be able to engage more in the course of their busy lives by working with their schedules and routines and knowing about how to maximize their child's development. So I think we've got lots of opportunity there. Those funds are going to be very well spent, and we need to just keep telling those positive stories. The department has already put out clarification, and you can see that on the website on this page. And remember, all these slides will be posted, so don't worry about taking notes in these fast-clipped discussions. But I want to make sure that we mention to you that the last bullet there, the Division for Early Childhood of CEC, has prepared a document to kind of give some guidance to stakeholders and to decision makers on the use of these rescue funds. So why don't we go ahead and keep moving and talk a little bit about one other piece. You remember, I'm sure, as well as we all do, that the rescue plan included funds in lots and lots of line items, certainly not just early childhood, but one of the key areas for families that I think we would be remiss if we didn't mention, since it just began last week, and that is the advanced child care tax credit. Tax credits have always been available to parents for their children, but these credits now have been increased, and not only increased, they've been made available to families who don't make enough income to file and pay federal income taxes. So these payments started being released July 15th. They will be released every month through December of this year. And there are already plans and movements afoot to try to make this a permanent piece. But there's some bullets on this page. I think it's all important for us to advocate for making sure that all families know about these funds and the availability of these funds, particularly if they're families whose income, federal income, did not necessarily cause them to file a return for the last 2 years or for this most recent year. So we need to do lots to help inform families. That's another just example of the rescue plan, and the rescue plan funds addressing all the needs of families and not just the education or special education funds that are so important. We know there are lots of funds in that package for other early childhood, Head Start, childcare, and that continues to be a huge advocacy effort for all of our organizations. So let's keep moving. And let's talk about this year and the funding. I'm going to echo some of the things that Valerie said, but just as a quick reminder, as we begin to talk, the rescue one-time only sustainable efforts. But what we need to focus on is making sure that over time, our annual appropriations keep increasing. So that's why we really have big smiles on our faces about this, because this started off this year with the president's budget request in May. We know the president's budget has no binding authority, but it's up to the House and Senate appropriations committees and their subcommittees to develop language in bills that dedicate specific dollar figures to every single federal line item. And in order for that to actually go into law, we know that by September 30th, not likely this year as other years, by September 30th, those have to be signed into law by the president. So they need to reach agreement, and it needs to be signed into law, or else we will have, and it's probably looking likely we will, have another, what we call a continuing resolution. I'm sure most of you are familiar with that phrase. It just means they give themselves more time until they can reach agreement, and we deal with freezes with the current funding level. We want this bill to proceed. We want it to get through, and we're going to share the good news that both the president's budget requested increases, significant increases in many of the programs that are important to children and families in this country, but also the House echoed almost all of those increases in the bill that just went through the House committee last week, and we expect will go through the House floor next week. So let's look at a little bit of those numbers, particularly around early childhood on the next slide. So I'm not going to speak to school age, as Valerie did such a really nice job of showing us where those increases would be. But let's go ahead and look specifically. And you're going to recognize these numbers because they will mirror the president's request, and they will also look very familiar because their funding levels very similar to the rescue funds. So in preschool special education, it would be an increase of $105 million over the current year we're in right now. And for Part C, $250 million over the year we're in right now. I'm going to mention two or three. This is an interesting phenomena, does not usually happen to this significance, but the president's budget request for Part C increases included some policy changes, frankly, fairly significant policy changes. They're echoed a little bit later in the House bill, so we'll mention them here and then talk about them in a little bit more detail in the next couple of slides. But it's not unusual to have policy language in a federal funding appropriations bill. Happens quite often. What's unusual is to have significant policy changes. And so there's lots of attention, lots of discussion, lots of data being gathered about the implications of these. But before we even mention them, I want to make it really clear, I'll probably say this at least one more time, that these funds are not, the policy changes we are talking about have not gone into effect, and they will only be in effect if that funding bill includes them to the very end and they're signed into law by the president. So at the moment, they are just proposals. We are also excited to see in the president's budget request long overdue funding for the Part D national activities programs. And my good friend and colleague Jane is going to talk more about that in a minute, so I won't say too much more. But again, good news. The trick now is to carry that through the House and Senate bills and get it signed into law so we can put it to good use. On the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about some other early childhood investments. And again, the president's budget request prioritized areas around access, areas in early childhood for sure. It's a major priority of the current administration, as you can see indicated by the secretary's quotes. And so there are increases in, we pulled a couple of significant programs here that are important for young children and their families. Increases in the maternal and child health block grant program, universal newborn screening program. You'll see the House put a significant increase in that one. Head Start increase and child care block grant increase. Those last two programs have received COVID and most definitely needed resources through the COVID bills that have been enacted. But it's positive when we know that some of these will become sustainable increases over time. And of course, that's our goal, to have them not be one time only. So let's keep looking on the next slide. The other thing that I want to note that's in the president's budget request, and you heard a little bit about it earlier, is while these are not bills, some of the pieces of these initiatives are already being addressed in legislation, like the infrastructure bill that Valerie talked about a minute ago. And some of these are showing up, or many of these pieces are showing up in the president's budget request. So it will be the job of the community and the Congress and the advocates for these programs to make sure that the pieces of the president's initiatives around American families and around American jobs show up in bills and actually get finalized into law. Lots and lots of disagreement. You know that's not unusual. I'm sure if you follow, no matter how you follow the news, print, paper, network, social media, whatever you look, you know that there's major, major disagreements about the pieces of the American Families Plan and the American Jobs Plan. And they're over the logical and expected things. How much money can we spend? More importantly, where will that money come from? And how do we define what's important for families? And how do we define what's important for infrastructure? And so they will continue to debate. They will continue to look to us for good data and information on the needs of children and families. So it's important for us to have those stories and those numbers to demonstrate that importance. So let's go on to the House. So the president set the stage, gave the money, gave the funding level requests. And as everybody knows, no matter who the president is, the word in town in Washington is always the president's budget is dead on arrival. So what you do then is you wait and see what happens. The House has already put their funds out for us all to see. They're public. They've worked on them over the last month or two. They've been passed by full committee. They're headed to the House floor next week. And we're pleased to say there's increases for most of the programs we talked about before. We'll wait and see then what happens in the Senate. No word yet on how much of these increases will show up in a Senate bill, but that's part of where all the advocacy efforts come in. So again, Part C, we see a $250 million increase. So echoing again the president's request, $105 million for preschool, increases again in Part D, including the most significant one, as Jane will talk about, for professional preparation, increases in parent training information centers, critical for families in order to get access to the IDEA services for their children, and then increases that all, if you look at the president's budget request and you look at the House bill, you're going to see a theme, not surprising, that we all support, which would be around access and equity for all children. Let's carry that, all youth, all students, to make sure that the needs of children and families are met going forward, particularly as we come, hopefully, out of these challenging times. $1 million increase in special ed research. And then interestingly enough, at the bottom of this slide, which I'm sure it's difficult for you to see, but this is another example of things that show up in a committee bill, and the importance of that language. Some of you may be following, there have been some action in the courts around the use of electric shock treatment and devices in behavior plans. And that's been a significant conversation in the disability community for decades. Some court action recently, which allowed that use of those techniques, only to be followed up a short week later by the House committee putting in their bill that you would be prohibited, any institution that uses electric shock devices and equipment for discipline and conditioning would be prohibited from federal funds. So you can see right away how the branches of government all kind of interact and work across each other, but you got to keep up with the program, because the last word right now is within the House bill. So let's keep moving. I want to talk a little bit, because this is really important to a lot of the folks listening today. Again, these are not set in stone. They have not passed. We don't know what will happen. It's our job to continue to provide information and data about the context of what these changes would mean, make sure that we all know what would happen, and of course, any unintended consequences that might occur. But I'm going to mention four of these real quickly, and I know I'm beginning to run out of time, but I want to make sure you mention there's plenty of language about these in other venues, other resources, but to make sure you know that the president's language for the increase, and the House has picked up this language, would require states with Part C grants, birth to 3 early intervention, to spend at least 10% of their entire federal award on a plan that would support equitable access and participation. Those plans would have to be approved by the secretary. The second one is a prohibition, again, if it goes into law, that would say that anyone with a Part C grant may not include in their system of payment fees for families or any out-of-pocket costs. Third, amending eligibility. There's a national study that would go underway, probably with or without this language, where education, health and human services, advocates, stakeholders, states would work toward developing a model eligibility criteria, if you would, in birth to 3. We've been talking about for decades the differences across states. And so this would be a model definition that we could all look at and use. In the meantime, states would be prohibited from changing or making their eligibility more restrictive without at least a 2-year prior notice for the field on that. And last but not least, it would be an optional use of states with Part C grants to use those funds to continue Part C services for children who previously were in Part C, who turn 3 until the beginning of the school year. So there's lots to unpack, lots to talk about. The bills are not, the language would need to really be interpreted. We'd have to see how these things would be implemented, lots more regulation, guidance, probably lots of OMB approval for data collection, including applications. But for now, remember, this is just a proposal. So why don't we go ahead? I'm going to just mention, just so you know, and many of you follow this very closely, lots more early childhood funding increases in the House bill, which we are hoping we end up seeing in the Senate bill and therefore signed into law. So I will not go over all of them. Again, the slides will be available for you, but you can see again the strong, strong priority of this administration for young children and their families. Looking at the next slide, and I'm going to summarize. Thank you. I'm getting some notes to do that. I don't want to be pulled off the stage as my colleague Valerie talked about before. Couple of things to take note of and go back and look at. The CDC has updated COVID guidance for education and childcare. Make sure you saw that. It gets updated quite frequently, and the last update was 2 weeks ago, so make sure you check. The next slide, we have a GAO study coming, probably get started sometime in the fall. You can see this was advocated by 3 senators, Senator Duckworth, Senator Casey, and Maggie Hassan, Senator Hassan. And this would be a GAO study. The GAO has already accepted it. We'll begin working on it. And it will look at not only childcare availability for children with disabilities, but childcare access for families and parents who have disabilities, and the difficulties, challenges, and solutions that they could face. So I am going to now just mention that the slides will be posted. We've got lots coming. We don't know what will happen next, so you can keep on moving those slides. We have several bills that are in the works because they have to be reintroduced. One that echoes the full funding Part B bill. We can talk more about that after it gets reintroduced. We have a slide next that talks about all the things that are overdue in Congress. We see this all the time, every Congress, and we're hoping we'll get some of these done. IDEA is not on the table, in case anybody is wondering, but we know we've already got some movement in CAPTA, some movement in education sciences reform, and home visiting is an absolute must because it will expire in 2022. I'll leave you with a memory if you want to look at the visual on the last slide here. And then I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Jane. But our job is to make sure that, thinking of our Schoolhouse Rock songs, that Bill is not as sad as this poor Bill looks sitting on the steps, but that our job is to provide enough information and support so that our legislative process goes well. And with that, I am going to turn it over to my friend and colleague, Jane. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. You all can see Val and Lindsay and Sharon and I, we do this 24/7, and the challenge is packing it into a few minutes. So we're going to do the best we can here. I realize I'm standing between you and lunch now. So let's go to the first slide. No, that's Sharon's slides. Okay. There was a slide before that. Go back. There we go. That's the summary of my presentation. Go to the next slide. The vacant chair. So I suppose if you take anything away from this, you'll remember that. And this is not going to be news to you. I think about IDEA as the promise, and the personnel are what makes IDEA happen. So when we don't have the workforce to implement what we have promised to parents and families and students and schools and our society, we're in trouble. And we are in trouble with our shortage, but we do have lots of good solutions on the horizon. So next slide, 3 examples of how this is playing out in states. Here's California. And if you look at the blue part of the graph there, those are the preliminary credentials in California, which are considered the full credential for a beginning teacher. So you can see in 2013-14, 46% of special ed teachers had that. If you shift to the end, 2017-18, 35% had that full preliminary credential. The other colors in the bar are interim credentials, provisional, emergency, waivers, etc. So that is not a trend that's going in the right direction. Let's look at New Mexico. So these are the number of teachers in New Mexico with alternative licenses. And you can see that's gone up dramatically from 2014-15 to 2019-20. Generally, a person with an alternative license is either in the midst of their preparation while they're teaching, or they've had a very short amount of preparation. Again, a trend that's concerning. But, you know, states are stuck. They're trying to figure this out. Next slide. So let's look at Michigan. The other thing that's happening is an increased use of substitute teachers. In Michigan, bear this in mind, you only need a high school degree to be a substitute teacher, and with no training in teaching, and you can be in the classroom for up to 2 years. 2 years. And of course, the biggest shortage area in Michigan is in special education. So you can see there that 64% of the respondents said they are using a substitute a few times a week. Again, there are even reports of states that can't even find enough substitutes. Next slide. I think this really sort of captures where we are. Special education programs have funding, but lack the educators. As you saw from Val's slides and Sharon's slides, the infusion of funds from the 3 COVID relief bills have been massive into our system. But yet, where are the personnel? I love the quote from Erin McGuire, the president of CASE. I think we're concerned about seeing a very active and engaged process at the federal and state level to address this issue. This is far beyond what school districts can solve individually. The other one is a headline from a recent article in the Washington Post right here in our area in Fairfax County, which is a affluent suburban county. I think that's where Lindsay lives, I'm not sure. Lacking teachers, Fairfax delays summer school for hundreds of students with disabilities. So this is the impact we're having. Next slide. And how does the pipeline look? Well, it doesn't look so great. Fewer people are enrolling in teacher preparation programs, which means that down the road, unless we have an investment and some recruitment strategies, and also address the conditions of teaching that have been talked about and the conditions in the school systems for these folks, we're gonna continue to have a tough time. You can see this is from between 2018-29 and 2015-16, decrease in awarded degrees of 15% in education, decrease of those enrolled in teacher prep by 37.8%, and a decrease in those who completed the programs by 27.4%. So the pipeline needs attention. Next slide. And how about retention? When folks get in the classrooms, are they staying? You can see by this, this slide that after 5 years, 53% are still in the classroom, which means that the remaining 46% are not. Now, this goes from 2012-13 to 2016-17. The reports we hear about burnout, about just feeling challenged, don't bode well, again, unless we have some intervention here. Next slide. So one of the other challenges here is the lack of diversity in our profession, a persistent, chronic, and ongoing problem. And you can see here that the top bar reflects the enrollment in our higher ed in colleges in general. And you can see there that let's look at Black student enrollment. 14% of college enrollment is Black students. Look at the bachelor's degree. Graduates, 9% of all bachelor's degree graduates are Black. Now look at teacher prep graduates. 6% of our teacher prep graduates are Black. So we are not drawing from the pool of diverse enrollees in higher ed. You can see the similar trend for Hispanic students. Again, this needs some major attention. Next slide. We know that our teacher diversity is not matched with our student diversity. You can see from the slides there, we have a predominance of white teachers. This looks like 78%. They're also predominantly female. If you look at the Black teachers compared to the Black students, we do not have enough Black teachers. We do not have enough Hispanic teachers. We do not have enough Asian teachers. And though there's no data on here, we don't have enough teachers with disabilities. This is something that I really hope we can pay more attention to. The research is very clear that when you see someone who is like you in a role of authority, it makes a difference. It gives you a role model of what and who you can be as you develop. So that's another area. Next slide. So just a few facts that I'm sure you're familiar with by now. So we've had a decline in the number of special education teachers. At the same time, we've had an increase in the number of special education students. Every state, 48 states, some people think it's all 50 states, but the last two don't appear to have reported their numbers yet. But special ed is the largest shortage area in all of education. This is not something that is distributed equitably. High poverty schools have more significant shortages than well-resourced schools. Also, the teachers in those schools tend to be unqualified, underqualified, and inexperienced, and the turnover is greater. Those prepared through alternate pathways that require less coursework and student teaching are 25% more likely to leave their teaching positions. So how you're prepared matters in terms of retention. The other aspect of this issue is our infrastructure to prepare the next workforce. Our infrastructure in higher ed is shrinking. Between 2009, 2018, a 19% reduction in the number of special ed doctoral programs. Data from 2018 show that this number of doctoral programs has dropped to the lowest level in decades. And we have faculty who have been laid off, the program shrinking. As you know, in higher ed, if your enrollment goes down, like those enrollment figures we saw, it is very hard to sustain the faculty positions. So we need to not forget to invest in the infrastructure that produces the pipeline. Next one. So also our specialized instructional support personnel. As everyone on this panel has mentioned, Valerie, Lindsay, Sharon, this is not just teachers. 63,000 school psychologists were short. Our school counselors, how in the world are we really going to get our hands around the mental health needs that we know we have without these incredible personnel? We also don't have a robust infrastructure to prepare these folks. Those enrollment in those programs have gone down as well. Early childhood. Sharon is the expert on this, but the shortage of early childhood folks is equally as critical. And you think that low pay is a barrier for teachers? Boy, double that for early childhood folks. Next slide. So help is on the way. We have a lot of momentum to address these challenges. Folks have been over these proposals before. I just want to say that in the 40 years that I've been doing this work, I have never seen such attention paid to this issue of personnel and the pipeline. Neither have I seen a president's budget that, at least in this area, has been totally adopted by the House of Representatives, almost to the word. The president asked for a 41% increase for the Department of Education. Imagine getting a 41% raise. That's pretty incredible. And the House, so far, it's still a work in progress, but the House has said, okay, let's do it. This is the largest proposal ever in education. Next slide. So the House, as I said, has adopted most of these proposals. The three that are really going to make a difference for our personnel are in personnel preparation under IDEA, the Teacher Quality Partnership Grants, which are part of the Higher Ed Act, and the Augustus Hawkins program, which is targeted to minority serving institutions and HBCUs to really address the lack of diversity in our field. Additional funding for all of those in that House bill. Next slide. So this is, Sharon talked a little bit about report language, it's kind of an inside the beltway thing, but it accompanies a bill. And I just wanted to point out that what the president put in his budget around this higher ed capacity is virtually repeated verbatim in the House bill. So there is a real interest, a keener understanding, and a lot of momentum about how this pipeline needs to be addressed. Next slide. So when the president proposes his budget, the Department of Education and our colleagues at OSERS, I'm sure, worked on this, have to say, well, what would you do with that money? If you got that increase, how would you invest it? And this is what the department has said about how they would invest in that additional $160 million for personnel preparation under IDEA, the money that is in the House bill. And if it comes to pass, there would be $30 million, new dollars for doctoral grants, $75 million for pre-service, $25 million for high incidence, $15 million for community colleges to support associate degree programs in early childhood special ed. Sharon, you see that? $10 million to develop career ladders for paraprofessionals to move into full teaching positions. We know that's a really good strategy. And $30 million for teacher coaches. Okay, let's go to the next one. This is the American Rescue Plan. This is the funding, that second infrastructure bill that people have been, oh no, I'm sorry, I'm confused. This is the money that's out there now in those COVID relief bills. And I just want to point out to you that that money can be spent to prepare new teachers. So if you're involved in making decisions with your district, be sure and point that out to them. Next slide. So this is President Biden's American Family Plan. Again, this is part of that second, what we call infrastructure package that we think we're going to see move in something called reconciliation. But look at all the funding in there to address the teacher workforce. $9 billion over 10 years that would go to a range of programs and some new programs that would make a huge difference in our special ed shortage. And I'm going to conclude with my last slide. Remember, if you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu. Now, this group is not on the menu because you're here. So that's it for me, and back to Becca. Can't hear you, Becca.
They told me not to mute myself, and I muted myself, and then I forgot. Thank you so much, Jane. Before we move into, we have a few minutes left for questions, but I just wanted to express my gratitude to Valerie, Lindsay, Sharon, and Jane for this excellent information. This is always such an amazing panel in terms of information, but it's also just a lot of fun. And I have a few things. I've been getting notes sent to me, kind of like the passage of the sticky notes that you see during the in-person conferences where someone's running up to the stage. So the first thing that I wanted to say is just these few announcements. Again, the slides are going to be available on the DEC website. Apparently, this will come as a surprise to DEC staff, but we know it's true because you just saw the DEC website address pop up on your screen. Also, all of the content will be archived on the OSEP Ideas That Work website and also on the YouTube channel. However, the conference website will remain available for at least the next month so that you can access these materials. And finally, you will be receiving an email at some point in the future, maybe later today, maybe tomorrow, with follow-up information, and it will also include the DEC website. So we're going to get to questions, and I wanted to just talk a little bit about what you have heard from the panel. You know, I am thinking about Will Smith because, of course, why wouldn't you think about Will Smith during a panel on special education policymaking? But he said something to the effect of, you know, racism isn't getting worse, it's just being filmed. And it's kind of like what's happened with COVID, right? COVID has just exposed long-standing institutional and structural societal issues that we have. And so I hope from this presentation, you've taken away that the administration is on this. There has been a huge infusion of money into public education since the beginning of the pandemic, and particularly since January of 2021. We have lots of money, and now we just need to make sure that we use it so that we are remedying the shortage of qualified and prepared personnel for our infants and toddlers, and then also for our students with disabilities and their families. We need to ensure that we are supporting the entire child. And so this means we are locating, identifying, and evaluating kids. Even when the lines get long, we make sure that these lines move along quickly and effectively so that we get students, infants, toddlers, children, and youth with disabilities to where they need to be, and that we maximize their participation with their non-disabled peers. Finally, I hope that you have taken away that there is some hidden language around Part C that could mean big changes for the program. And so we're going to want to pay attention to how that appropriations language makes it through the final bill passage. So I am going to look at my screen. And Jane, we have a question for you. Your key takeaway was around diversity in the workforce. So here's a question. Special education teacher preparation, retention, diversity data so is the data around preparation, retention, and diversity related to general education teachers similar or different to that of special education teachers?
You know, that's a great question. For the most part, I think it's pretty similar. I would have to go back and double check, but what I do know is that we have a significant enrollment problem in teacher prep across the board, but it's worse in special ed, or it's more severe in special ed. Mm-hmm. And I don't know about diversity. I don't know that the special ed teacher workforce is even less diverse than the rest of the general ed teacher workforce. But what I do know is that they both are challenged, no question about it.
Great. Thanks for that. And maybe that, piques somebody's interest to do that research, find out that information. I have another question for you. So this would be for everybody on the panel, and jump in as you will. We know that there's this huge amount of money out there. It's a 41% increase for education. And we know it may or may not become law. So we'll kind of table that. But what would this increase mean for implementation? And you all, everybody in the audience, you're not privy to our backstage conversation, but I am particularly interested in Part C, but I'm going to let the 3 to 21 people who focus on 3 to 21 go first, and then we'll let Sharon chime in on the Part C at the end. So anybody who wants to take that question about what would this massive influx mean for implementation?
So I'll jump in first. I think I mentioned earlier that we need to start looking at what is appropriate instead of what is available. And a lot of times when decisions are made, it is based on what is available, which is in turn based on resources. So I don't think there's any doubt that increased funding means that we can do more for all of our students that we already have, and those that we know might be coming through the pipeline based on what we've been dealing with for the last 18 months. Thanks,
Valerie. Sharon, why don't we have a hard stop in 4 minutes. So can you just give us a couple of ideas around infants and toddlers and their families?
I think I would just remind everybody the importance of documenting well the investments that we're being given right now, and to focus on the primary purpose here, which I think we all agree with, which is making sure we have access and equity, and ensuring that all children and families who need the services get what they need. And then we just have to make sure we keep the families uppermost in our mind, because that's why we're here.
Thanks. You know that I'm a bit of a ham, and I would love everybody's last memory to be of me. I will say the last thing that I'm going to say, and then I'm going to turn it over to each of you for your final thought, what you would like the audience to have as their key takeaway from your presentation today. My final thing that I'll say is that remember that we still have other sessions today. We hope that you participate. And we are just so grateful for the level of participation and your continued commitment to infants, toddlers, children, and youth with disabilities and their families. So I am going to pick on Jane first. And could you just give us a key takeaway that you'd like people to keep with them as they continue their work?
Well, first I want to say thank you. You know, as I said, I've been doing this a long time through many administrations, and the partnership that our field of special education has with the Office of Special Education Programs is unparalleled in the government, in my view. And I'm so appreciative of that. So thank you to all of you who work so hard every day. My key takeaway is stay at the table. Be there. Bring your voice. Tell your story. Talk about the difference it would make. I like to tell people, put a sticky on your computer of one advocacy act you can do every day, whether or not it's call your school board, whatever it is. So stay at the table, make time for advocacy, make your voice heard. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Lindsay, quickly, what's your takeaway that you'd like people to remember?
Yeah, thank you, Becca. You know what? We talk a lot and we complain a lot about the system, but we are the system. And so just as Jane is saying, make your advocacy moment happen each day. I would say what we saw was that the power of collaboration increased in some places, it decreased in others. Let's lean into where it increased. We are only as good as our general education partners. We shouldn't have two siloed systems. There is a lot in the system that does that, but we can make a change. That's my takeaway.
Thank you so much. Sharon, you have about 15 seconds for your key takeaway.
I think I've done that already, but I would just remind everybody, thank you all. This has been a great experience. We have lots and lots of good work to do together, and I trust we will all do it. So with that, I will turn it back. Thank you, Becca.
All right. And Valerie, take us home.
A couple of things. One, let's not fall back into old habits. We have done some things and changed some things that have worked, and we need to continue to move in that direction. We need to continue to collaborate and not just with the usual suspects, because we see that when we link arms and move forward, we can overcome things. We have got to prioritize professional development. All teachers should be able to teach all students. Otherwise, we will never realize that least restrictive environment for every student that we want. Got to deal with equity. It's the elephant in the room that is not getting the attention that it deserves. And if we want to see the outcomes that we want for all of our students to be tax-paying, independent, employed, productive members of society, we have got to deal with that. So that's it. Thank you, Becca.
Hey, thanks panelists, thanks participants, and we will see you on another stage at another time, and hopefully in person. Thanks. Have a great day, everyone.